You're not a piece of dirt. You're a valuable human being, created in the image of God, who God loves so much that he sent his son Christ to bleed and die on a cross to forgive you and to give you eternal life. So you're not a piece of dirt, Jacob. You're a valuable, precious treasure who God created for a purpose. That's exciting, isn't it?
But you said everyone's value of each other is subjective. Yeah.
No, if there is no God. I was at the University of Arizona. Guy said, of course I date rape. I said, really? Why do you date rape? And he said, because I have a very high testosterone level.
Well, me being not agnostic and me being a highly motivated, intelligent student have nothing to do with each other.
Yes, they do.
In what way?
Because you're a highly motivated person, you have to ask yourself, if your brain is in gear, what's motivating me? And why have I chosen that motive to be worth it? Why have I chosen the motive of a degree at UT to be worth all the money, all the work that I'm putting in to get a degree?
That leads to a successful life.
Good. So then obviously you have defined successful life.
Yes.
You're not agnostic. And you've said, guess what? Money?
Not being agnostic has nothing to do with it, though.
Sure, agnostic means I don't know.
Yes.
Okay? So don't tell me you don't know anything.
But back to your point about what happens after death. If I don't know what happens after death, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna you know what? Because I don't know what happens after death, I'm not gonna try in school. That has nothing to do with anything.
I know that. I never said that. Come on, man. You're attacking a straw man. Forget it. And that's why my point to you, Jacob, is you can tell me intellectually, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Jacob, the simple fact that you're a student here at UT Austin means you do know a lot. You do know that enrolling and studying hard and becoming a student here at UT Austin is worth something.
Well, then you seem to have a very high view of myself, which I appreciate. But to tell you the truth, I only know one fundamental fact about life, which is that I know that I know nothing. Truth be told,
Jacob, that's a lie. You're lying to yourself.
Am I?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. You have used such articulate speech that you know something. You know how to speak the English language, Jacob, and you do a very good job, by the way. So don't stand out here and tell me, oh, I don't know anything. I don't know nothing. You know a lot, Jacob, and your articulate speech is clear evidence that you know a lot. You're not a dummy. You're a very intelligent guy.
Why, thank you, Cliff.
You bet.
See, the fundamental divide and gap between us is over the issue of, in my view, of taking a stance. Now, in some respects, I do agree you're right. Sometimes in life, you must take a stance. You must take a stance within certain values in certain situations.
Jacob, aren't you taking a stance?
I am.
Okay. So you and I are no different. You're taking your stance, I'm taking my stance.
You told him his stance doesn't mean anything.
But sometimes
being agnostic means not knowing anything.
I'm just showing him he's not being consistent. That's all I'm showing.
Sometimes it's okay if you don't take a stance. It's okay to not know. And of course, in regards to being agnostic, it doesn't necessarily need to apply to the rest of your life. To put it simply,
Jacob, guess what?
I don't know if God
I don't
is real
know.
or not.
Jacob, I do not know whether Coke or Pepsi are better. I really don't. I honestly don't know. But Jacob, that is so much different from saying, I don't know whether she's valuable or not. I don't know whether he's more valuable than her. Totally different issue, Jacob. Whether I don't know about Coke or Pepsi being better really is not that significant. But whether I view her and him as being valuable human beings, that means a ton, Jacob.
Precisely, which is why, to connect back to my argument, it is of the utmost important to take stances sometimes in your life to give yourself meaning. I am taking the stance that it is not always necessary to take a stance. Try that one on. Perhaps it is necessary for me to take a stance that I believe that my roommate Gabe is a pretty cool dude.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate that.
But is it really necessary to take the stance to say, I don't really know if God is real or not. I don't really know if God is real, whether or not it is a he, she, it, or they. I don't really know if there is a God, whether it is a he, she, it, or they. If it is, like what the Baha'i point out, an overarching force, an overarching lump that seeps within all crevices of existence, or whether or not it's more of a traditional and albeit boring understanding of God from, say, Christianity.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Jacob, I think it gets real simple now. Do you think it's important to understand purpose and meaning in life?
Sure.
Or are you content to live a meaningless existence?
Sure, but the aspects and understanding of what gives your life purpose, what gives your life meaning, can be up to each individual. To you, you have obviously taken the hard stance on religion, and that gives your life meaning, and that, Cliff, is fantastic. But to give my life meaning, I don't need to do that. I could take the
Okay,
full
so what
hard...
brings your life meaning, Jacob?
What brings my life meaning?
Yeah.
The stances I take towards my views and ethics, towards the people whom I appreciate and love.
Good.
I don't need to have meaning towards religion. I don't need to have...
No, but the question is, why are these people valuable?
Because I think they are. I don't need to...
Okay, and I disagree. If tomorrow you think your friends are not valuable, I think you're wrong tomorrow. I'm very grateful that today you think they're valuable. But you see, I think they're objectively valuable. I don't think they're valuable because Jacob has decreed that his buddies are valuable. I don't think that's the reason they're valuable.
And I disagree.
Right. But then if you disagree, what you've got to acknowledge is tomorrow, if you think they're dirt and worthless, you're just as correct tomorrow as you are today in saying that they're valuable, because it's all subjective, it's all relative.
And I do, and that happens all the time.
No, it doesn't,
If I
Jacob.
wake up tomorrow and
How
view my...
many times have you woken up and looked your roommate in the face and said, you're a piece of dirt?
Not yet.
Thank you. All right, Jacob, bravo.
I think of many theoretical situations in which that might happen, and I think it happens all the time. There are plenty of friends I've known, unfortunately, who've woken up one day and thought of me as a piece of dirt.
That's tragic. That's sin. Because you're not a piece of dirt. You're a valuable human being created in the image of God, who God loves so much that he sent his son Christ to bleed and die on a cross to forgive you and to give you eternal life. So you're not a piece of dirt, Jacob. You're a valuable, precious treasure who God created for a purpose. That's exciting, isn't it?
But you said everyone's value of each other is subjective. Yeah.
No, if there is no God. I was at the University of Arizona. Guy said, of course I date rape. I said, really? Why do you date rape? And he said, because I have a very high testosterone level. And I said to him, fine. If you're a moral relativist, and if you have a very high testosterone level, I understand why you date rape. But I'm convinced that when you date rape, that is evil because God created that woman with intrinsic value, and when you date rape, you are dehumanizing, trivializing, and sinning against her and against God.
I appreciate that you have such high views of women and how society tends to devalue them. I wish the Bible had such same views, but that's a whole other discussion.
No, it's not. It's a very relevant discussion, Jacob. Thanks for raising it. When you study the Roman Empire, when you study the beginning of Christianity, what you begin to realize, there is no organization, there is no religion, there is no institution that has done as much for women as the Christian faith. Today, what is the demographic in this world with the highest percentage of Christians in it? Women of color. The demographics in the world today, the group with the highest percentage of followers of Christ are colored women.
Because
Shadow slavery.
Because of crusades? That is so racist, it's so sexist that you would say that. It's scary. I can promise you, the vast majority of Asians, South Americans, and Africans who believe in Jesus, it has nothing to do with colonialism or the Crusades or the Inquisition or some KKK member. They look at Jesus Christ, they understand Jesus is not Western, he's not a white guy, they don't worship a white guy, they worship a first century Jew. Jesus of Nazareth was not a Western Christian. They worship him because the evidence is he lived the truth, he taught the truth, he died for it, and he rose from the dead. That's why they follow him.
So then why were there crusades if everyone already believes this? There's no reason for the crusades, right?
The reason there are crusades is because of evil.
Well, Cliff,
That's exactly right.
Well, okay. You bring up some very interesting points about women of color and why Christianity is the largest religion today. And with that demographic, it may or may not be women of color. But
It is.
there is a religion that in a few decades will overtake Christianity, and that religion is Islam. Now, I have heard some of your opinions on Islam, how it treats women and such. On average, there are some really good Islamic societies, but by and large, I think that it's a pretty uncontroversial statement to say that many Islamic societies do not treat women with respect. Not all, maybe not even most, but certain subsects do.
All of my Muslim friends treat women with dignity.
And that is really good to hear.
Okay.
But that unfortunately is not the case everywhere.
That's right. Very good, Jacob.
So then why is it that those oppressed laden down women who have been, demoralized and degraded for centuries. Why do they choose Islam? Why don't they choose
I don't know. You have to ask
Christianity?
them. I don't know.
So,
You better ask them.
So if those women, if they were not so stupid, because they're not stupid, then why would they not turn to Christ? The religion that loves women, the religion that treats women with respect, because obviously within our society, the subsects known for treating women the best are Christians. That's just common knowledge.
In the last year, Iranian women have departed from Iran in terms of how women are treated, and it's been the fastest growing church, shockingly to me, in Iran is Christian women because of how they're elevated within the Christian church. Now, you're exactly right. You brought up fringe, white supremacist, conservative Christians. You're right. There's absolutely some sexism in there. But no, the central message, I think that is an incredible testimony right there. I had no idea that the fastest growing church is in Iran over the last 2 years, solely based off of women because of the sexism that they had experienced in a different religion. So it connects right back to the Roman Empire, where the vast majority of the church were slaves, and then women were uplifted more so than any other religious or worldview or philosophy that was espoused. But again, that doesn't mean that women have not been abused in some kind of way in the name of Scripture, or just like slaves, how the Bible has been co-opted by racist slave owners. No, there's absolutely been abuses. But if you look at the very fundamental of Scripture and go right back to the early church, when they lived it out in terms of Galatians 3:28, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female, for we are all equal. That was what sparked an egalitarianism within something like the church.
The issue with me is that there's a direct correlation between strictly following the Christian faith and the conservative agenda.
Yes, I love that you're going here, because this is so relevant.
And I guarantee you, I know he's not going to say anything, but he's conservative, I can tell. Just by the way he's preaching. He seems like a evangelist. Yeah. That's what I'm getting from him. Or Jordan Peterson.
The $54 million jet?
Yeah, stuff like that. Or Jordan Peterson, where he pretends to support this, but in pretending to support something. I don't know if you guys know what Jordan Peterson is.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of people seek faith because they're lost. And Christianity is a good outlet for that. But I'm saying the issue is the ideologies that arise from that Christian faith. Because everyone wants to believe there's a God, there's something higher out there, that there's meaning. But you can find that in yourself. You don't need a faith. And with Christianity, it builds that conservatism, that hatred towards women, even relative to how they're being treated in like Iran, like you said. It doesn't make it much better when we're taking away the rights for them to choose whether or not they can have abortions in Texas, because that's a fundamental human right that we decided over 40 years ago.
But who is they? I mean, there's a separation between church and state. You're automatically just grouping all Christians into, they're stripping away rights from women.
I totally agree there should be a separation between church and state. And that's the issue with outlawing abortion in Texas. Greg Abbott's not doing it because of moral reasoning. He's doing it because he's Christian. Because he believes that that's fundamentally against his Christian faith.
So you brought up your first point. We don't need faith, we just need ourselves, but you kind of contradicted yourself because you said everybody wants God. So which one is it?
Everyone wants to believe there's something more to life.
Something more to life.
Yes.
You said God originally, now you're saying just something. What does more to life mean?
More to life? A God doesn't have to be a sentient being. A God to anyone can be something they believe in. Just some meaning, rather.
Okay, the majority of atheists I debate do not want there to be a God. There are some of the best philosophers, Thomas Nagel at NYU, very well published. He said there are many good evidences for God, but I don't want God to be true. I don't want the universe to be set up in that kind of way.
Well, I don't agree with him.
You don't agree with him?
I believe everyone
You made this generalization, though. You said everybody wants this. I know tons of people who do not want that. They want to live for themselves.
It's okay.
And then they don't want eternity, because eternity sounds tremendously boring to them, or it even sounds tremendously limiting, and it feels like suffering to them. But your point is to live for self, and yet there's some kind of meaning out there that you want?
And we can find meaning through different means.
And I'm like,
like a job, like a family, like raising a family.
Right.
That's an outlet many of us find, or someone to love.
Yes. Yes.
And I guess Christianity ends up being that outlet because they love being loved. They have this idea that a God loves them.
That's my question.
And that's why I'm not against the Christian faith.
No.
I'm against the issues that arise. The fact that conservative exists because of Christianity.
Right. So if you're going to take away one thing from today, please take away the following. Every worldview, specifically religions, are all about belief. Believe, 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 and then hopefully live it out. Don't come to the Christian faith because it makes you feel good, because it works. Come to it because it's true. And if you don't think it's true with no evidence, don't come to it.
I used to be Christian, I'm not anymore.
But do you see what you're doing right now? You're not saying weigh the evidence and see whether it's true or not. You're just saying, does it make me feel good? Does it kind of work? It's just a religion. No, it's come to it whether based off the evidence it's true or not.
A lot of people, at least the younger population, they don't blindly believe.
So then I want to ask.
They don't blindly believe something absolutely. A lot of Christians now will probably become atheists eventually. That's the truth. At least young Christians, because they're forced into that, and they realize later on what they believe. Like you're saying, they find out, oh, I don't really believe in a God. I just liked the way I felt being in a community.
There are tremendously powerful doctrines, groups, and subgroups around today. The LGBTQ has tremendous power in schools right now. Many of the atheistic agendas shown through something like scientism as the only source of truth is science, is a huge part of academia right now. Christianity and many other religions have been pushed out and are considered either just kind of a joke or pluralism in the sense of they're all teaching the same thing. So you can't say that just Christians are forced, brainwashed as little kids to grow up. Because I have many friends who are atheists who were brainwashed. They were never allowed, they were never taken to church. So it doesn't matter the group. But let's go back to your subgroups. I think there is a heroic narrative out there where everybody wants to be an oppressed people group. Everybody wants to have their identity and value found in, I'm an oppressed person, so I can fight back against another person on Twitter, on Instagram, on any social media account, and I find my value there. That's why you have extremist groups on Twitter, 6% controlling 75% of the content, politically speaking, that's on there. And we all form subgroups, and this is why you go to the conservative party. Isn't conservative just evangelical? As soon as Donald Trump won, a woman who was an evangelical Christian came up to me and sobbed in my arms for 10 minutes and said, I can't be evangelical Christian anymore. She totally misunderstood what an evangelical Christian is. It's not about labels. You are not a label. It's about a relationship with Jesus Christ and whether Jesus Christ was the Son of God, is the Son of God, or not. Evangelical, the term itself, if you look at the history of it, has more so to do with opening your eyes, Christians, not going with fundamentalism, things like bashing of certain people, things like no science. Evangelicalism initially was all about Christians need to open their eyes, need to witness, and need to accept those types of things. But now it's been co-opted, to your point, to conservatives. A 33% Donald Trump type of group that has co-opted the term evangelical, that lives a certain way, that deviates from Christianity, can't be trusted. It's where you get the Proud Boys. It's where you get many different groups that are tremendously hateful.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, no, you're not saying anything that's incorrect per se, but it's the preaching.
Why did you decide? Okay, you don't like preaching?
No.
Why did you decide to leave the Christian faith?
Why did I decide?
Or stay on the topic that we were talking about? Either one. You said you were a Christian. Why did you
I
leave?
was Christian. The reason I said I was put into a church.
Okay.
I thought I believed it.
Right.
I liked the community.
Right.
And then I realized I don't actually believe this. There's nothing to believe really, because to me there's a lot of contradictions with the Bible.
So that was the main reason.
Yes.
Contradictions in the Bible.
Yes. And I haven't touched Christianity for a long time, so if you were to ask me right now, contradictions now, I wouldn't be able to answer you.
Okay.
And it's not going to be proving me wrong. It's the fact that it's been 5-6 years.
Did you look into those contradictions?
At the time, yes.
You did. And you couldn't find
comes
answers.
back up.
They were just obvious and they just stayed there?
Yeah.
if you kill the guy,
And I don't like the arguments like the people being mistreated and say like the people that are starving in Africa.
And if I wanted to eat the cow later,
the argument is it's a test of our faith. That's the only argument I hear. Because if God was truly loving of everyone that exists, He wouldn't let all those people suffer just because they're of that demographic, of that country. And I don't see how that.
And if there is no God, you shouldn't really be bugged so much by that. It's like 3 deer in the Sahara, or Kenya rather.
I think you can
if you have 3 deer grazing together, let's say it's a parent, a brother, and a sister, and the sister's picked off by a lion. The brother and the parent are going to lift their heads up, watch, and go right back down to grazing. Sure, there's some animal species that care more about each other, but they don't really care that much. And we didn't just evolve to be annoyed by suffering more and more. Suffering really shouldn't bug you that much. And yet, that suffering and evil bug you so much points to something outside of yourself, some moral absolute saying that you're right. It is really wrong. And what's the response? What's the answer to it being wrong?
Intelligence. We're emotionally intelligent beings. We have more emotional intelligence. We have more just intelligence in general. I have not seen an animal build a building like this.
Right.
Other than humans.
Right.
I don't see a squirrel building that. A squirrel's not emotionally intelligent like a human is. And we're able to empathize with other people. That's where we get our morals from. We can see how this is wrong objectively, almost. Of course, morals aren't objective. But if you're a sane human being, you can point wrong from right.
If you're a sane human being.
Yes, of course. There's psychopaths or sociopaths that have no care. But
so you're a sane human being.
Like I don't want to make someone suffer from my being.
Okay. Okay. So your type of morality comes from suffering. From everybody should be happy. Nobody should suffer. Is it a type of flourishing?
I believe everyone has equal rights to being happy.
Why does everybody have equal rights? Why should they have equal rights? Why should you buy into human rights? When we come up raised red in tooth and claw, the powerful eat those who are not powerful, survival of the fittest. How does that make sense in that type of worldview to fight for the hurting? That's the opposite of how we've evolved.
Well, we've already developed a society. We can. There's evolution of society. Like at the beginning, it's hunting and gathering.
Yeah,
that's survival of the fittest, like you're saying.
Right.
And then there's agriculture, and then there's urbanization. Or I skipped a few in between, but I'm saying not every single step of the way is survival of the fittest. Even though now it is basically with capitalism. I'm not against capitalism, but I'm saying. The richest survive, the poorest don't. Like, we can see all the homeless people out there. They're also suffering. And if there was a Christian God, like we're saying, I don't think
we should just allow them to suffer, because they're taxing society anyway.
They're not taxing society.
Yeah, they are, the homeless?
No.
How are they not taxing society? They're not benefiting society at all.
They're benefiting.
How are the homeless people benefiting society? They're a tax on our resources, on the welfare system. They're human beings. That's why we should watch out for them?
They have inherent value as human beings. Everyone has value. Because we're
Why do they have value?
Because we're all human. We're all alive. We all have sentience.
We all have sentience. That's why we have value. What are those who don't have sentience?
Everyone has thoughts going through their head.
So everybody who has thoughts has value.
Yes.
So anybody who has no thoughts, who's been in a car accident, and has serious brain trauma, who can't have thoughts at the time, they don't have any value.
I'm sure according to Christianity they don't.
According to Christianity, they don't have value?
I'm pretty sure.
Every single person is created in the image of God, Christianity says, and that's what changed the early Roman Empire. You check out the history for yourself, and it swept across the world, creating a type of egalitarianism that had never ever been seen before. That's why infanticide was eventually outlawed, because Christians had such an incredibly dominant impact of removing infants off garbage heaps and raising them up. That's why they went after slaves, and the majority of Christians in the early Roman Empire were slaves. It was all about oppressed people groups because they all were created in the image of God. Now you go to atheist countries. So for example, many of those over in Lithuania and other countries, you have a decrease of those with spina bifida, born with spina bifida. Before they're born, they're aborted. Other special needs kids. There's a decrease in special needs in those countries by 30%. And it's because they're all aborted. And initially you hear, wow, that country's getting healthier. But no, it's because they're all getting aborted. Do you agree with that? If somebody does not have
certain types of functioning capabilities, they should automatically, every single time, get aborted?
Where you can get those other facts.
If so, why not?
Yeah, I feel like you pull out a lot of these facts, or alleged facts, and you're not giving any studies or any.
Yeah, we're going to need
websites.
some sources on
Sure,
these
Luc
facts.
Ferry. Luc Ferry, the best-selling author, Luc Ferry. Lucferry. Non-Christian. Non-Christian making this point of being made in the image of God and how it changed the entire world by Christians. So again, how do you gain value? How do you give value to somebody? Based off of your worldview.
Off of my worldview?
Yep.
They're human. That's literally
They're
it.
human.
Yes.
Isn't that speciesism?
Yeah, it is speciesism.
It is speciesism.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so a dog doesn't have any form of value.
A dog has value.
A dog has value.
Not as much as a human.
Okay. How do you grade value then?
How do I rate value?
Yeah.
How do I rate value?
Why do you have value? So you disagree with the man who was out here who said that no college students yet have value until they actually start working. Or they're in the workforce.
I agree. Everyone has value. As a human being, everyone has value.
Why do they have innate value? What do you mean by value?
Innate value meaning that they just have it, right?
They have innate value?
Yes.
I've never heard an atheist tell me before that human beings have innate value. You would be the first.
Everyone has. I don't see how that's a wild concept to not believe in a God and believe everyone has value.
You can create your own value. Sure, just like creating your own meaning. If there is a God, then you are given meaning versus achieving and creating your own meaning. If there is a God, you have innate value because you're created in the image of God versus you're just here on this planet and I'm going to create value for her, him, her, myself, and I'm going to rank them. It's like a caste system. See, if every human being, according to your worldview, do you believe that every single human being across the planet, no matter who they are, is worthy of protection and provision?
Yes, assuming they have not done anything that's like.
I'm taking notes so that whenever I step in,
terrible. Okay, I'm not gonna go into.
Okay, so now you're contradicting yourself because earlier you said every human being that can feel or process thoughts has value, but now you're saying there's certain human beings who've done bad things who do not have.
Are people supposed to communicate moral language, if not by, well, the act of communicating? You seem to be objecting that. Well, who says? That utilitarian philosopher, he had to come up with a theory. He had to communicate it and explain it. How else are people supposed to communicate moral language to each other? The fact that people communicate moral theories to each other doesn't mean that those moral theories don't exist prior to their communication. It doesn't make them subjective. It makes them objective, but nonetheless, some of those moral theories don't require the existence of God.
Which one? You got to put one forward. You can't just keep throwing these all out.
Utilitarianism is one. Deontologicalism is another. Virtue theory is another.
Okay, still though, you don't get moral duties and obligations with most of those.
Yes, you do, absolutely.
Moral Platonism is the direction that I would go in if I were you, because you're not taking any of these and really unpacking them. You just keep throwing them out like
Fair
this
enough.
petri dish.
Maybe.
So just take Moral Platonism or one of those, and here's my problem with it. I think it's fairly convincing, because it's still saying that there's some type of justice or standard of moral objectivity outside of us. It's a transcendent type of principle, but you don't need to posit God. Convincing, way more so than subjective morals that are here on this plane. And yet the problem I have with it, which is why it's way more convincing for there to be a God, not Jesus Christ, not the Judeo-Christian God, but just a personal God, which turns out to be the Judeo-Christian God, is because it's still an obligation to who? It has to be personal. Not just all-powerful, an all-powerful understanding of good, but a person that you are offending. That's where you get objective values, duties, and morals, where it's a person who's stating these things and saying they are right and wrong, versus Moral Platonism, which is just this broad, general, ethereal, theoretical, pop, justice, pop, goodness. Here it all is, and it's just ambiguous. Do you see the personal need?
Yes, but your moral theory removes the analysis of the content. It doesn't matter anymore whether or not a proposition on its content is good. Now it only matters whether or not God condones it or supports it.
No, false. And that's your straw man that you're wailing away on. Guess what, sir? That's easy to do. I could do that very easily. But that's a straw man. That's not what we're saying.
What's the view then?
What we're saying is real simple. It takes a human mind to create right and wrong. Bricks, no ability to understand right and wrong. Tree, no ability to understand right and wrong. It takes a mind. if there is no mind prior to the human mind to create and define right and wrong, then it's obviously the human mind that creates it, which means it's all relative depending on which human mind you're talking to.
I explicitly refuted that. I said the mere fact that people communicate moral language to each other does not make it subjective.
Baloney. Why is it wrong for me to hit him? Not because there's some principle out there. It involves personhood. I, a person, am violating him. That's why it's wrong. And for you to argue that it's wrong because there's some esoteric principle out there, I disagree with. I don't feel guilty because I violated an esoteric principle. I feel guilty because this is a person and I violate him in some way.
How do you know why you feel guilty? You know you feel guilty. How do you know why you feel guilty?
Because I have a conscience that convicts me of guilt.
Yes, but how does that get you to the conclusion that, oh, it's God, it must be because of God? You know you
because
feel guilty.
Because a conscience cannot exist if there is no God who creates me.
Personal being that you're offending.
How do you know that that relationship actually exists? You know you feel guilty. How do you get from that point to the leap where I feel guilty because I offended God, as opposed to I feel guilty because there is some objective principle I'm offending? How do you know that the reason you feel guilty is because you're offending God?
Again, the reason I feel guilty is connected to moral objectivities, oughts and shoulds. Let me try and flesh this out then. If we keep getting a logjam, let's try and flesh this out with examples or illustrations, okay? You go with one, I'll go with one. I'll start. True story, not too long ago. A man was going to a psychologist and he was cheating on his wife. He was cheating on his wife over and over again. And the psychologist was a client-centered psychologist. Basically meaning we're all devoted just to your happiness, not anybody else's. So he kept doing it and he seared his conscience. Psychologist was agreeing with him. I'm cheating on my wife with a bunch of other women. It's great. One day he comes to the psychologist and says, I can't do this anymore. I don't know where this feeling, this ought, this should, all of a sudden, this objective moral feeling that there's something in the universe that's telling me that this is actually innately wrong and I ought and should not be doing this. He said, if that thing, which is transcendent, he said, did not exist, there would be no moral objectivity and there would be no meaning to my life. Because the moral objectivity question is always connected with meaning. If there is no ultimate right and wrong, then there is no ultimate purpose and meaning to my life. It's all made up, it's all subjective.
So I take it you're familiar with the is-ought problem. David Hume posited that. So basically what he was saying was, if we live in an empirical world and all we can actually take in through information is just empirical evidence, all of that is instantiated stuff, that's is stuff. How do we get from the is stuff, which is just about factual here and now, to the ought stuff, which is something about it's a counterfactual situation we're positing about what we ought to do in a different situation. So, first of all, it might be an open question that oughts even exist. That might be an open question. I don't agree with that. I think that oughts do exist. The reason why I don't agree that oughts require positing the existence of a God is because if I believe that God's essence or God himself determines the goodness or rightness of things, I've removed the content analysis entirely. Goodness just becomes the decree of God. And that removes all content. It doesn't matter what I say to you, so long as God condones it, that makes it good. That removes the purpose of philosophizing in general.
I agree with that part.
We're not talking about.
But where do you get your ought then? Where do you get your moral duties and obligations? Because you brought up a good point in terms of evolutionary theory is posited oftentimes when it comes to morality, but I see a failure there because that still has to do only with our emotions. We've evolved in such a way where I have this emotion that's connected to I can't do this or that to you because we're part of the same tribe and we're part of the same kin. I think it fails because if there's no moral ought and duty and should, the moral ought, duty, and should has to be connected to a person that is outside of us, a transcendent type of person.
Do you believe that?
Doesn't that make more sense than if it's just a principle? Because I feel no burden to just have this type of living certain type of way
and I believe in that. I do, and I take to that. I subscribe to that framework. It's not impossible to be moral just because you don't believe in God.
Then why not just break it all the time? Why not? What ultimately gives you the motivation to not break it?
I have moral obligations. Are you seriously positing that?
What's the obligation?
How come,
Who are you obligated to?
Atheists aren't running amok killing people all the time?
Because they got consciences the same way we all do.
That's missing Dostoevsky's point. When Dostoevsky says, there is no God, so do whatever you want, all things are permissible, he's not saying atheists are worse than Christians. He's saying understand from a moral obligation point, if there is no moral obligation or objectivity. Nietzsche said the exact same thing. A Soviet guard said the same thing, who he said, I thank you, God, the God who I do not believe in, that I can kill this person right here, right now, because you do not exist. All of them abided by that. But they were never taking the position of somehow atheists are way morally worse than Christians.
Okay. Well, do you believe that it's possible for a person to know, for example, that there doesn't exist such a thing as a married bachelor? That's true, a married bachelor. We don't need to consult evidence. We don't need to look out into the world to know that's true. That's definitionally true. That follows from logic. Of course, if I were to tell somebody, person B, hey, you know what? It turns out married bachelors don't exist. The mere fact that I communicated that to that person doesn't mean that it's a subjective fact. It's an objective fact. Where do I get that objective fact from? Do I have to posit that hypothesis in order to know that?
Yeah, you have to believe that your rational mind tells you the truth about reality. Now, why do you believe that your rational mind, if it's just a developed monkey's mind, tells you the truth about reality? You have faith that your rational mind, your ability to do logic, puts you in touch with what's true and real. That's quite a step of faith. Now, if you think about it, if there is no God, your rational mind comes from the irrational. Really? That's a gigantic leap of faith. I, as a follower of Christ, understand my rational mind is a gift from a rational being, and it really does get me in touch with reality. That's why I better reason and not lapse into the irrational.
What's your basis for that connection?
And so your whole example of there's no such thing as a married bachelor is simply using reason, logic, and saying it's impossible to be a married bachelor. It's illogical, irrational.
Fair enough. So you make this connection. I have a rational mind. It comes from a rational God. What is your reason? What is your reason for positing that? It can be any reason. Just tell me what the reason is.
The reason that I think it is more reasonable to believe a rational mind comes from a rational mind is in all of my observation of life, I never see reason coming from the irrational or the non-rational. I only see reason coming from rational beings. Therefore, is it more plausible? Is it more reasonable to conclude in the beginning God, the rational, than it is for me to believe in the beginning the irrational? It's a no-brainer. Why? Because all of my experience, all of my observation of reality is reason comes from reason. Reason never comes from non-reason.
Fair enough. So you posit that the connection between your rational mind and God exists and is true because you consult your reason, which itself is predicated on the existence of God, giving a foundation for all reason, which itself is predicated on the existence of God. You're consulting the same evidentiary support, rather I should say the same justification.
That's a begging the claim fallacy.
It's a begging
No. You just did a great job turning what I said to you into a meaningless cycle. I said to you, my observation is, in life, that reason comes from reason. It does not come from non-reason. Therefore, I've got to ask myself the question, is it more reasonable to believe that human reason comes from a rational being, God, or is it more reasonable to believe that human reason comes from non-reason, no God?
You can't come to that conclusion unless you're using your rationality.
Well, obviously,
and what's
the only reason we can have this conversation is because you're
and what's the
using your
justification for consulting your rationality and paying it such deference? Why?
Why?
Yes.
Because my observation is that you can't have, as you put it, a married bachelor. The law of non-contradiction, A and non-A, cannot both be equally true in the same way at the same time. That is my observation of reality. So I've taken my observation of reality, and now I'm asking the question, is it more reasonable for me to believe that my rational mind comes from non-reason, or is it more plausible to believe that my rational mind comes from a rational creator? And sir, that's easy. That's really easy for me. That doesn't take a philosophy degree from UT.
Would you agree that it wouldn't make sense to ask that question if God didn't exist? You couldn't come to a reasonable conclusion, right, without God?
No, it's way less likely to. One, understanding that we simply evolved from highly intelligent monkey minds. Would you trust the mind of a monkey? Secondly, we have evolved in order, whether it's the strong eating the weak, or whether it's somehow just survival of the fittest, that's how we've evolved. We haven't evolved to seek after truth or reason.
Would I trust a monkey mind?
Truth or reason?
I wouldn't trust.
We haven't evolved. We shouldn't even really be having this conversation if there is no God. Because we're simply evolving in order not to seek truth and reason, but simply to survive. We should still be seeking to survive today. And there's a total disconnect between the two.
I wouldn't trust the judgment.
Every good philosopher says that. You brought up a lot of philosophers, so I'm going to say it too. Every good philosopher now, that's recent, in the last couple of years, it originated with Alvin Plantinga. Nobody has been able to discount that yet from a perspective when it comes to God. That's where you get the reason coming from God. That He has created us as reasonable creatures. It makes way more sense coming from a guided type of process from God through evolution than no God positing an unguided process only connected to survival of the fittest rather than an ability to reason and seek after truth.
It might be the case, maybe, I'm not exactly sure. It might be the case that nobody has been able to discount that view you just put forward. It's also simultaneously true that nobody has been able to posit such a wide-ranging supported thesis so as to prove your point either. There's plenty of things in philosophy that are disagreed on. Plenty of things.
Sure. Well, I don't ever say you can get to proof. Proof oftentimes involves, many will say, science, and proof oftentimes it includes a total lack of consensus on what the word even means. So I would never posit proof, especially when we're talking about philosophy. But let's stay on reason for a second. Do you really think, as a society, we could have a well-functioning society, morally speaking, if we all just use reason to weigh in what is truly right and wrong?
Certainly. I think we already do that. I think that is the situation we're in right now.
Okay, let me give you an example then of a humanist at Harvard who lived through a certain prisoner of war camp with Eric Liddell, the great Olympian runner. He went into this war camp as a secular humanist. And he said once he got into this war camp, he trusted all the Americans in this war camp. He said, you know what, we're going to use our reasons. We're going to go about separating rations equally. Then all of a sudden, he had a bunk of 9 bunkmates. Next to him was another bunk of the same size. But they had 11 in there, and they were suffocating because 2 did not have bunks. He said, oh, it's okay, we're going to reason ourselves to saying, let's be equal here. Let's have 9 and 9, or if more come in, 10 and 10. Nobody decided to take the choice to be reasonable and morally just to have equal amounts in each bunk. He came back and he said, I am a Christian now. I am a Christian because I believe that it's a heart condition created by a creator who gave us hearts to sacrifice, to love, that are transcendent, ethereal things, not based solely out of reason, that somehow, which I don't believe, came from evolution. I don't think it can come. The seeking after truth cannot come from evolution. So that is why reasoning human beings, we all have sin problems. There's no way we're just going to reason our way to justice. It takes more than that. That's what this Harvard secular humanist, that was his whole point.
Okay, fair enough. Are you under the impression that over time, something that changes from another thing cannot have a different attribute than the thing from which it came? So, because I take it what you're saying is, look, you can't get a rational mind out of evolution. I mean, we're talking about apes, not necessarily chimpanzees or monkeys, but apes that existed millions of years ago. They clearly didn't have the kind of sophisticated reason we have. Therefore, how could we possibly have developed from evolution? Is that your position?
No. You're trivializing my position by saying, are you saying that if there is no God, you can't have this? Never once have I said that. Instead, please listen. I use 2 words, most reasonable, most plausible. And I asked you, is it more reasonable to believe that reason comes from non-reason, or is it more reasonable, more plausible to believe that reason comes from a rational being? 100 times out of 100. Not that I can prove it, but in my observation, it's more plausible to believe reason comes from reason, it does not come from non-reason.
It doesn't get to the substance of the question, which is, does objective morality require God to exist?
Okay, well, I think it's time for us to stop, because we have talked an awful lot. We don't want to beat a dead horse to death more. Thank you so much for raising those issues.
I don't think any of them are correct. Perhaps
None of them are correct. Okay.
None of them are correct. Perhaps there is a higher force out there beyond us. perhaps it is an advanced race of aliens beyond our comprehension, perhaps it is a spiritual God. I don't think anyone on earth has it correct. I don't think I have it correct necessarily. I don't think you have it correct. I don't think anyone here has it correct. And that's my opinion.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Now, did I just hear you say, I don't think anyone has it correct? Did you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a truth claim? Have you just made a truth claim when you have said, I don't think anybody has it correct?
Well, I don't think anyone has it fully correct. Perhaps.
Okay. Is that a truth claim? I don't think anybody has it fully correct. Is that a truth claim?
Truth be told, I'm not familiar what a truth claim is, please.
That this is real. This is correct. What you've said is, I don't think anybody has it correct. Have you not made a truth claim?
Well, I think by the statement in of and itself is that I don't think anyone has it correct, so I don't think it is in of and itself a truth claim.
So just listen to what you're saying. I am so intelligent that I realize nobody has it correct. Sir, that is an amazing truth claim. You're saying all the Muslims in the world, all the Jews in the world, all the Hindus in the world, all the Christians in the world do not have it correct. Sir, that is one fantastic truth claim. Now, why do you hold so tightly to your truth claim that nobody has it correct? How do you know that? Nobody has it correct.
Well, Cliff, have you been listening to what I've been saying?
I've been listening to every word of what you've said, in spite of the fact you got interrupted by a guy.
Well, the fundamental reason why I believe that no one has it fully correct is just by studying and examining these religions, seeing the juxtaposition between the loving aspects of, say, Christianity versus the smiting God who turns women into salt pillars. And as I described Christianity, a series of codexes, we see that some stories are of a loving Jesus and others are, of course, turning women into salt pillars. And really just by studying all of the various religions, you see that, well, which one stands out? Which ones do not? Please, give me a concrete reason why Christianity is any better than any of the aforementioned religions. Or any worse. That's precisely the point. No faith stands out amongst the others. If one faith truly had it all correct, who truly had it down, if thousands of years ago, when these men were riding in their Bronze Age houses, in their palaces, in their little mud huts, wherever, and if they had it truly correct, would it not stand out?
Beautifully put, Jacob. All those dummies living in those mud huts obviously didn't have it correct. But I, as a student here at UT Austin, majoring in history, I am smart enough to tell you that there is no religion that is correct. They're all the same. Sir, that's an incredible truth claim. All right? So my question to you is, why are you so convinced that all those dummies in those mud huts around the world are wrong, but you, as a history major at UT Austin, are correct? Why are you so confident of that, Jacob?
Well, you see, by going by your logic, it would seem that my argument makes no sense. Why is it that me as a freshman who hasn't even spent more than, a few years of my life studying these issues, why am I correct, whereas all of the people in the past, the so-called dummies in the mud huts...
Yeah, that's what you said. You talked about the dummies in the mud huts.
Did I call them dummies?
No, you didn't say dummies. You said all those ignorant, basically, people in those mud huts. I'm not. Yeah. He talked about people in mud huts.
I talked about...
Very clearly.
I did.
He did. Thank you, Jacob, for your honesty.
Please,
thank you.
Please explain
all
to me
those people in those mud huts who thought that way, obviously, I know they're wrong. Wow, Jacob.
Have different connotations around mud huts.
Yeah, you better believe it. For a UT Austin student to talk about those people in mud huts, we got a problem. You and I have a real problem.
You know, mud
you are so elitist, it's scary.
It is quite underrated. Mud is fantastic. It keeps the cold
Jacob,
in
that's
and
what
the
you
hot
meant,
out.
right? You meant all those sharp, intelligent folks who live in mud huts.
Quite frankly, I meant it as a sign of admiration.
Oh.
As a sign of admiration.
Come on,
please,
Jacob.
Let me explain.
I need to move on from the mud huts. Keep going.
But to end on the issue of mud huts, I can see, yes, I did say it in a way that would indicate negative connotation, and
Thanks
I apologize for
Man, I like your honesty. Thank you. All right. Now, Jacob, please let me jump in.
Okay.
Let's be real clear. You're making a truth claim that all the religions of the world have it incorrect. That you are correct, that all religions are the same. That God is not a he, God is not a she. You said God is not a he, a she, an it, a they. You said that God is everything. Here's my problem with that. If it is true that God is everything, that you're part of God and I'm part of God, why is it wrong for me to hit you? Why is it wrong for me to murder you? I'm just part of God. Murdering part of God. Nothing wrong with that. I'm part of God, and if I choose to love you and feed you, or if I choose to murder you, one's not right, the other's not wrong. Why? Because we're both, as you said, we're both part of God. So what you do, you see, when you say everything is part of God, you wipe out the basis for being able to distinguish between justice and injustice, good and evil.
Did I say that though? Did I
No,
say
you
that
did
we're
not
all
say
part
that.
of-
You didn't say that.
You didn't say
I didn't
You did not
say
say
that.
that.
But may I?
No, I'm not finished.
Okay.
All right, I listen to you. Now, please respect me enough to listen to me, okay? Fair enough? You did not say that. I'm saying when anybody says, everything is part of God, you wipe out the basis for the understanding of the distinction between good and evil. Why? Adolf Hitler's part of God. Mother Teresa is part of God. You can't say that Hitler did evil and Mother Teresa did good. They're all part of God. That's my point. You said you were agnostic. Let me tell you why you can't be agnostic.
Okay.
You have to, I'm talking intellectually, you have to answer the question, why is human life valuable? You have no choice but to answer the question and live out, why is a human life valuable? Secondly, you have no option. You're going to have to answer the question, is there a purpose to life? Thirdly, you're going to have to answer the question, what ethics am I going to embrace, and why do I embrace the ethics I do? And fourthly, you're going to have to go to funerals, so you're going to have to ask the question, is there life after death or not? And you can't keep on saying, I don't know, I'm agnostic. I don't know, I'm agnostic. I don't know, I'm agnostic. Because you got to live your life. And you're going to have to treat a person as if they're valuable or as if they're a piece of dirt. You're going to have to treat a person as if there's a meaning and purpose to life, or as if there's no meaning and purpose to life. You're going to have to treat a person understanding goodness and justice and compassion, or you're going to have to live your life and treat people as if there's no such thing as goodness, compassion, and justice. And guess what, bud? When you go to a funeral, you're going to have to ask the question, by gollies, is there anything after this thing? Or do we all head it to the dustbin? You have no option. And guess what, Jacob? You're a good thinker. So you know very well that you're not agnostic. You can't just keep on saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Because like it or not, life forces you, Jacob, to answer those basic 4 fundamental questions. Why is human life valuable? Why is my life valuable? Is there a meaning and purpose to life, or is there no meaning and purpose to life? What ethics am I going to embrace? And what's the evidence that the ethics I embrace, whatever they are true? And by gollies, what happens after death? Is there maybe life after death, or is that stupidity? You see why you cannot be agnostic?
So then let's go through those questions one by one then, shall we? Number 1, is human life valuable?
Yeah.
I don't know. You see, I don't know if it's valuable. To me, it's valuable, but who am I? Who are you? Who are we?
Good. But why have you concluded that life is valuable? What's your evidence that life is valuable?
Do I have evidence? I just have my own non-objective views. I think it's valuable just because that's how I contextualize it.
Good. But then what you have to acknowledge is, if tomorrow you conclude life is not that valuable, you're not wrong. It's just all a taste. Do you like broccoli or do you like spaghetti? Maybe today I like broccoli more, maybe tomorrow I like spaghetti more. It's all relative. So maybe you like to love people today, but if tomorrow you choose to hate people, nothing wrong with that. It's all just a choice.
Precisely.
Good. Good to talk with you, man. You're consistent.